Hi, this is CK at CK Education, and today I want to talk about the 80-20 rule, also known as the Pareto principle, Pareto, Pareto. This principle was first sort of documented, discovered, if you will, by an Italian economist named Pareto, Pareto, um, who who learned that he always knew that the 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 economy in a country, the economics was unfair. That rich people had more money, and there were and they controlled most of the money, and there were people who were very, very poor who were dying and and going through terrible things, while very, very ultra wealthy people had more money than they could ever know what to do with. And he knew this existed in society, but he wanted to measure this and he wanted to sort of document this data. And what he found was very interesting. He found that 20% of the people in the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s, I think it was like 1906 that he sort of documented this, but he found that 20% of the people in Italy owned 80% of the wealth in Italy. He learned that 20% of the people in Italy owned 80% of the land. Now, he went further. He didn't look just inside of Italy. He looked all throughout Europe, and he found the same thing, that in every country, in fact, not even in his era, in every era, all throughout basically human history, he found pretty much for the data that he could find that a small minority, usually about 20%, owned 80% of the money, the wealth in a country. He also found this to be existent in nature and in his backyard. When he went and he had a farm, he had a little garden, and not a farm, but a garden. And he found that 20% of his pea pods produced 80% of the peas. And so he said, this is very strange. This is very interesting. How is it? Do countries, do governments purposely design it so that it works out like this? And he found that the conclusion was no, it's not deliberate, but it's just the way naturally things turn out. That a small minority of causes result in the vast majority of outcomes. Okay, so this works in many, many, many different ways. And I've been using this principle for 30 years, probably 25, 30 years in my career, in everything that I do. I understand that this is a natural phenomenon that happens and is something that you have to be aware of. And if you use this correctly, you can do a lot of things much more efficiently, and you can see the causation of things, and you will understand the difference between correlation and causation in a lot of things if you understand this. So, and today I want to focus on how this relates to SAT prep. Okay, so here's what happens in SAT prep for in the vast majority of cases. People focus on the 80% that really produce no results. They don't know the difference between the 20% of things that really produce results and the 80% that really you could do a lot of things, but it doesn't really produce results. So most people work on the 80%. Why the 80%? Because it's bigger, because it's more popular, because more people approve of it, because logically it just seems like that's where you would go attack it. That's what you would do, okay? Rather than learning and finding out what the actual 20% is. Do you know why a lot of people don't work on the 20%? And this is actually the most important thing and actually the thing that produces results, because people don't know that it exists. People think that if you just do what everybody else does, that you'll get results. But the problem with that is if you just do what 80% of people do, doing 80% of the things, the 80% things that don't really get you anywhere, you get approval by people. Yeah, that's what we're doing too. You're doing that. I'm doing that too. You get approval. People approve of each other and they all fall off the cliff together too. Okay. So doing that is popular, but it is not effective. And this is the same thing happens in SAT prep. So the vast majority of SAT prep courses, and you can call around and all over the place and you will see what do. They get a prep book of some sort. Okay. It's one of the four main ones, probably. It's either College Board, Princeton, Kaplan, or McGraw-Hill, one of those four, right? Or Barron's, maybe. So what do? And then they do that, and then they just go over problems. The vast majority of SAT prep is that way. They're doing the things that get no results. But since everybody does it like that, it doesn't raise any eyebrows. It doesn't step on any toes. It doesn't cause any controversy. It's just a comfortable thing to do. Everybody does that. They do that. We do that too. And everybody falls off the cliff together. Nobody knows that, wait a minute, maybe that doesn't work. Maybe there's this 20% of the things that actually produce results, but I don't know what that is. So I'm just going to not deal with it. I'm just going to keep doing this. This is what everybody thinks, okay? So even people who think maybe there's a 20%, they're too lazy, they're not motivated, they don't ask the right questions, and they don't pursue it. Because usually this 20% that actually produces results is not just handed on a silver platter. It's something that you have to take some time, you have to do research, you have to read, you have to test it, you have to experiment with it, you have to keep improving it, you have to do it. And it takes time and energy to find out what this 20% is, okay? Think about income. Just think about when Pareto found out that 20% have 80% of income. Most people cannot do it. They don't know what the 20% do. They don't know what they do to get that kind of result. So they just do what everybody else does. And they get the results that everybody else gets. Even though that's not satisfactory, even though that's a little bit disappointing, at least, well, I'm like everybody else. And so it's that mindset. But the 20% that own 80% of the land, they have a different mindset. They don't operate on that mindset. But nobody takes the time to say, what is that mindset? Okay. So people like Napoleon Hill have documented these things. He wrote a book called The Laws of Success. He wrote a book called Think and Grow Rich. And these are the aim at, and many people have written books like this over the years about how successful people think differently. But again, if we just focus on SAT for a moment, it's the same thing that happens. When I was beginning this in 2009, I had never taken the SAT before. I don't know anything about it. I didn't know anything about it. I'd never taught it before. But thinking back, that was actually to my advantage, because if I had done it before, I would have probably done it just like everybody else does. But because I had zero experience, zero knowledge, I took the time to do the research to find that 20% that really works and create a system based on that, rather than just doing what everybody else does. And that's why my students get results. Even when other programs didn't work, they get results, because I do things very differently. I teach them very differently. I want to change their mindset. And students who follow my program, they get their mindset changed if they're mastering the things that I'm telling them, if they're learning the things that I'm teaching them, because we're doing different things to get different results. Okay, so if you look at each of these, and I don't want to go into a lot of detail, because then I'm really getting into the nitty-gritty of my program, and then it'll bore you to death. But for just as an example, if we're talking about grammar, okay, if we're talking about the writing section, I know people who teach like from 3 different grammar books, as if they're teaching, grammar in school. I only teach 40 grammar rules. Now, these are not just random grammar rules. These are the 40 grammar rules that are the most important to know for the SAT in raising your score. For example, okay, when I'm teaching math, I know some people who teach, oh, you got an Algebra 1 problem wrong, so we're gonna review Algebra 1 for the next 3 months. What a complete waste of time. What is that concept, or those 3 concepts perhaps in Algebra 1 that you must know to do well in the SAT? Nobody researches that. They just look at, let's just cover Algebra 1. And then they're doing that for 3 months. Or some people say, oh, that was a pre-calc problem, so you got that problem wrong, so we're going to do a pre-calculus review. I always tell my students, you don't even have to have taken pre-calc to know the little pre-calc that's on the SAT. I can teach you all the pre-calculus you need to know in like 15 minutes, because there's not much on the SAT, okay? And so, but people don't understand that. They just think pre-calc, and so they teach pre-calc. Algebra 1, they teach Algebra 1. Geometry, they teach geometry. And on and on and on and on. In reading section, do you know how many SAT teachers I've met and I've heard talk about you should read all these kinds of books, and you should read newspapers and magazines like the Atlantic Monthly, and you should read Harper's Review, and you should read Time Magazine, and you should read the Washington Times and the Washington Post and the all these newspapers and the New York Times and so on and so forth. You should read these books, and you should read it's overkill. You don't need any of that. I don't have my students reading newspapers and magazines and doing vocab stuff. It's a waste of time. It's not going to raise their score. So I have them and I teach them very specific reading rules and concepts and principles and tactics that they have to follow and know to do well in the reading section. Why? Because I'm focused on the 20% of things that really get results rather than doing what everybody else is doing, the 80% that gets no results. So not only do I use this on SAT, but in business, I use it in my life. When I was an engineer, I used it all the time. When I was doing consulting, I use it all the time. When I'm teaching my kids, my own kids, I use it all the time. So when I'm hiring people, whatever the thing is, I use this rule because I understand that it is a thing that just exists in nature. Okay. So I want you to understand this, the 80-20 rule. It's not always exactly 80-20, by the way. Okay. But it's to say that a small minority of causes produces the 80%, the vast majority of results. It could go the other way. The small minority of people in your organization could be causing 80% of the problems in your organization. If you're a manager, it could also be that 20% of your salespeople get 80% of the results, 80% of the sales if you're in sales, for example. So this is how it works. But if you understand this principle and acknowledge that it exists and know that it exists, and you can use this to your benefit, it will help you become more efficient and make better decisions in your business, in your education, in your life, in your health, and on and on and on. So I hope it helps, and I just wanted to put that out there. And thanks for watching this video. And until my next video, I hope you stay well.